All right, welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Huddle. We are so excited about today. This is going to be awesome. This is episode 37, and we're going to be talking about solar today. And we've got an amazing guest, Eric Meldrum, my good friend that I grew up with. And he is an expert in solar, actually works for Sunrun, and one of the smartest guys I've ever known, actually. He actually had a pretty good ACT score, too, if I remember right. But very, very smart guy, and I love to hear you talk about this stuff because you talk about it with a lot of knowledge behind it and just understand the industry very well. And so there's probably a ton of you out there, listeners, who may be thinking, like, should I get solar on my house? Does it make sense? What are the pros? What are the cons? So we're going to kind of talk about both sides of why it may make sense, which situations may make sense, and which ones don't. But Eric, you'd been mentioning to us a little bit about like preparing for the future of costs, electrical costs and stuff like that. Do you want to highlight a little bit about what people should be thinking about as far as that goes?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the last 5 years, Xcel Energy has moved pretty much everyone over to time of use billing, which means that in the middle of the afternoon when electric demands are highest, you're getting charged a much higher rate than you are at the off-peak hours. And what a lot of people don't know is that those rates, both peak, mid-peak, and off-peak, those rates have gone up by about 40% in the last 5 years. So that's 8% annual average increases. And there are a lot of reasons to think that that's probably the new normal rather than just a blip. Because right now with the utility companies, we're kind of sitting in the middle of the eye of a perfect storm. So first of all, a lot of our grid infrastructure is getting pretty old. A lot of it, especially in like the core near, inner suburbs, like near Denver, a lot of that grid infrastructure was built, anywhere from the 1930s, 40s, sometimes even earlier, and has, had upgrades from time to time, but still pretty outdated. You combine that with the fact that the demand for electricity is just going through the roof right now. Huge data centers that are gobbling up tons of electricity for AI operations, crypto mining, that sort of thing. People going electric with their vehicles and with their, replacing their gas furnaces with electric heat pumps, demanding more electricity. Even just population growth. I mean, the more people we have, the more electricity we need, and the more grid infrastructure we have to build out to, places like the exurbs near Parker and Aurora and places where there's a lot of growth happening. So not only do we need more electricity, but we need more reliable electricity. We are in a situation right now where we just a couple of years ago, we had the deadliest fire in Colorado history, and it was caused by a downed power line. The Marshall Fire up near Boulder. And in response to that, the Xcel has preemptively shut down the power grid in recent windstorms. We had one about 6 weeks ago where there was a major windstorm, and a lot of people had their power cut for 18 hours, 2 days, things of that nature. So they need to make the grid more resilient, more reliable. There could be, if they don't, there are going to be more outages going forward as we try to prevent those wildfires. So in addition to more and more reliable electricity, we need cleaner electricity as well. So there is a mandate from the state of Colorado right now where all the utility companies need to be producing 80% renewables by 2030 and 100% renewables by 2050. So what that means is that Xcel has a close to $8 billion plan in place to, close down fossil fuel powered plants and replace those with solar and wind farms and battery storage, among other renewable sources, which is great and something we desperately need, but also is going to come with a price tag. And that price tag is going to get passed along to the consumers. So it is kind of this perfect storm where we need more electricity, we need more reliable electricity, we need cleaner electricity, and we're trying to do all that on this outdated, aging grid infrastructure that desperately needs some upgrades. Sure. And so all those things are going to have a cost, and those costs are going to get passed on to the consumer. So that's a big reason why we believe that 8% annual average increases in your electricity rates, that may be a conservative estimate moving forward.
So a couple things come to mind when I hear you talking, right? Because we may have some listeners that are like, all right, I want to like do what's best for the environment. And then we're such a divided country, like politically right now, right? You may have others that are like, I couldn't care less. I think it's all a hoax, whatever, right? It doesn't really matter which side you're on. The biggest thing that I heard Eric say was cost, right? Like the cost is going to go up. And that I think is just inevitable. Like there's nothing you can do no matter what you believe about energies, renewable energies, all that stuff. Like you are absolutely gonna feel it in your pocket from the electricity standpoint. So it's got to be something that you at least look into. And we say all the time to home buyers, like marry the house and date the rate. Like, you can buy the house and lock in pricing today, but then date the interest rate because those can be refinanced. You can refinance an interest rate a year or 2 years down the road and save a lot on your payment, right? This is kind of a similar concept of like lock in your rate now as far as energy goes, because that energy cost is going to go up tremendously. And if you can lock it in for 25 years, right? That's how your leases go typically. Yeah. Then that's a big win for a lot of people that are going to be in their home for a long time. So what questions do you guys have for Eric to just open it up to a couple other topics around the real estate like industry?
I guess if you could walk people through what you offer in terms of owning it outright or leasing it over time, stuff like that.
Yeah.
What can a current homeowner expect?
Yeah, absolutely. So current homeowners, you have the option to purchase the panels. We have partnerships with Costco and Lowe's, and through our Costco partnership, we offer some really great perks for homeowners who just want to buy their panels. And you can buy panels either just like cash purchase up front or do a financing option. Although with interest rates kind of where they are right now, we typically recommend that you do a leasing option instead of a loan option. So yeah, you can buy the panels outright, and that typically, depending on the system size, depending on how much electricity you use, and how many panels you're going to put up on the roof of your house. I mean, that can be anywhere from like $20,000 to $30,000 up to $50,000 or so. I've seen some obviously much bigger, but I'd say that's kind of the typical range. Then there is also the 30% federal tax credit that you can claim when you file your taxes next year. And that applies when you purchase the panels.
Any details on that? Well, share with us, because I think a lot of times like you win when you purchase it, right? Or when you start. Does it apply to a lease and a purchase, or is it just purchases, or how do the tax credits work, and any amounts you can share on that?
Yeah. So the tax credit is the federal tax credit is 30%. It was actually George W. Bush who first put that tax credit into place back in 2006, and then it was extended and kind of beefed up a little bit through the Inflation Reduction Act a couple of years ago under the Biden administration. But it's a 30% federal tax credit.
So 30%, explain that, 30% of the cost of the solar?
The total cost of the solar, including the equipment, the labor, the install, all of it.
Tax credit.
Tax credit.
Up front.
For
this current tax year?
It's when you file your taxes, it goes against your tax liability.
For the year that you install?
For the year that you install. And if
Okay.
your tax liability is not big enough to use the full tax credit that year, then you can roll that credit over for up to 5 years.
Oh, wow.
So,
Do you get any benefit if you're leasing?
So our leasing options, so we do offer a lease, which it has zero upfront cost, zero down. And essentially what you're doing when you lease is we are going to install panels on your roof, but we're going to continue to own them, which means
You're getting them.
we're claiming the tax credit, and we are able to pass some of those savings along to the customer to allow our electricity rates to be lower than what Excel offers, because we're able to claim that tax credit and then pass that along.
So another question I've always wondered, so if you can take more panels on your house, create more energy, what's the sellback rate? I've always heard it's a lousy deal, don't do it. But you can create more energy than you're using and then sell it to the marketplace and get some additional, right?
Yeah, so that's what we call net metering. And when you sign when you go solar, you sign a net metering agreement with the utility. That's basically like any excess that I produce and I feed back into the grid, you're going to give me a credit for that. And the way that the utilities structure that can vary. I live down in Colorado Springs, and we do a 1-to-1 net metering, but it's just credits to apply to your future utility bill. So for every kilowatt hour that I feed back into the grid, I'm going to have a credit for 1 kilowatt hour to use. Like usually during the summer months, my panels are producing more than I'm using. And then during the winter months, I'm using more electricity than my panels are producing. So I'm going to be using those credits that I've built up during the summer in the winter when my panels aren't quite producing enough to cover all my electricity needs. Now up here in Excel territory, they will pay you for those credits. The dollar value of the credit depends on when you actually feed the energy back into the grid. Like it's worth more at the on-peak hours than in the off-peak hours. And so that's actually one of the benefits of getting a backup battery for your home. Tesla Powerwall. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're kind of popular nowadays. We oftentimes install a Tesla Powerwall or two with a lot of our homeowners, so that not only can they have the peace of mind of having their essentials backed up for multiple days in the case of an outage, but also they can kind of shift their time usage so that like in the middle of the afternoon when rates are at their highest, they can be using their battery instead of grid energy. And then they can be feeding energy that they produce from their panels back into the grid, at the higher rate. So it's almost like you can do a little bit of arbitrage, almost a little bit of like buy low, sell high, and reduce your bill or make a buck even further using that.
Go ahead.
Well, so two questions. My understanding was it can be prohibitively expensive, especially storing the energy with like a battery. What's kind of your cost breakdown between actual solar panels and like doing, let's say, a Powerwall?
Yeah, so the batteries, and we do offer a couple different batteries. We offer a kind of like a more base level battery from LG that is a 9.3 kilowatt hour battery, and its primary function is just to sit there and serve as like a backup in case your home goes out. You can't like program that to different times we're going to draw off of that or feed energy in. But then the more premium level one we offer is the Tesla Powerwall 3, which just came out. It's the latest and greatest. And they're not cheap. Lithium ion batteries are, lithium's just in really high demand right now.
Dangle it out there. How much are we talking?
So if you were to buy outright, your first Powerwall battery with us, including labor and installation, is around 19 grand, and then second and third are about 13. And you do get the 30% tax credit on those in addition to the solar panels. So the net cost is significantly lower than that. But yeah, that's once you apply the federal tax credit. For our lease customers, having the backup battery is usually an extra $89 a month on that. So, it's not cheap, but for some people, the peace of mind of being protected in an outage is really worth it. As well as, if you are able to do some of that time shifting and like lower your bills even further, that can kind of make up for a little bit of that extra cost.
And for a homeowner considering adding solar, do you know kind of what your average break even is? If I'm going to move away and sell my house in 3 years, I'm assuming probably shouldn't buy solar panels. What's kind of your average break-even point where you're getting a return equivalent to the investment?
Yeah, so I mean that really depends on if you're buying or leasing. If you're buying the panels, buying, I would say, where rates are right now, I would say the break-even is about 10 years. So that's not gonna, if you're only planning to be in your home for a few years, it might make more sense to lease, because with the lease, you are starting to see savings on your bill right away. They're not huge savings. They'll grow over time as the utility company continues to raise their rates more and more, and the gap widens between what you're paying us for electricity versus what you're paying them. But yeah, if you're buying your panels outright, your ROI is going to come back in about 10 years. Like your break-even point is going to be in about 10 years.
Interesting. Cool.
We were talking earlier about when you're leasing from a real estate perspective, it's much easier to get a buyer to assume a lease if you've got a great rate, et cetera, than it is if you have financed them yourself and have an ongoing payment.
Yeah. And that's true. Like right now, just the market conditions with interest rates being where they are, I would say 90 some odd % of our customers, very few of our customers right now are looking at like loan financed options to buy their solar panels. It is something that like some people really just like the idea of ownership. And for those people, like, hey, that's great. Like if you can't afford right now to buy them up front, but you really want to own them, like we do have financing providers that we partner with, but right now our interest rates are at about 4.5% on our financing options over a 10, 20, or 25 year loan. So with our lease is just a better deal right now.
And I think what sucks people into the purchase is probably the tax credits, right? That's the biggest thing. And what's like your average cost of a purchase nowadays for solar? Would you say?
I mean, it really depends on the size. It's priced per watt or per kilowatt.
Gotcha.
So each panel is about 400 watts. So if you're, say you're adding 20 panels up there, you're getting, what's 20 times 400, or 20 times 4. We're looking at an 8 kilowatt system.
Got it.
Which is, maybe about an average size system, maybe a little bit above average. I'd say average size systems are about 6 to 7 kilowatts.
Okay. I think it seems like 10 years ago, I was seeing a lot of systems that were costing total like between 18 and 26,000. Nowadays, it seems like it's between 32 and 40,000, something like that.
Yeah.
Is it more normal?
So this is something that I run into with a lot of customers. And it is, for some people, it's a little bit of a source of disappointment because there have been so many headlines about just how cheap solar has gotten. And that's true. Like the panels, the panels have gotten better, they've gotten more efficient, and they've gotten much, much cheaper to manufacture. At the same time, the labor and installation costs in every trade, in every industry, have gone up. And so at the same time that the price of the panels has gone down, the price of the labor and installation has gone up. So I think all things together, panels are, getting solar installed on your house is, about the same as what it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, adjusted for inflation.
Okay. So on a $35,000 purchase for a solar system, $10,500 would be the tax credit, right? Of 30%, basically, roughly. So it's a pretty good chunk, towards your taxes now if someone is really needing a tax credit offset. But it seems like your dollar for dollar on a lease, you're probably doing better on a monthly standpoint because a lot of that savings gets redirected back to the consumer that you guys are getting from the tax credit.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing about doing a loan to finance solar panels is that most financing providers for solar panels are expecting you to take that tax credit and then put it back into the loan. Okay. So most solar loans will reamortize after 18 months. And so if you have paid off a certain amount of your principal, that is the amount of the tax credit by that point, then your loan terms just continue as they were. If you haven't, like if you take that tax credit and take a nice cruise or trip to Disney World, then your monthly payment on your loan is going to go up.
And I guess, how would you respond to some of the common objections, right? Like, I hate the way it looks on roofs. Like, what?
Yeah.
Do you guys really take that into account as far as trying to put it on the backside if you can, or it kind of depends on where the sun's hitting?
Yeah. When we can, we'll, a lot of people are like, hey, I want to have them on the back of my home. And we can work with that to a certain extent, but some homes are just like the way they are oriented, the way the roof is shaped. There's only so many places we can put panels up there. I would say if you don't like the aesthetic of them, I mean, you're kind of out of luck because more and more homes are going to be going solar.
Yeah.
So like if you don't have one on your street right now, you probably will soon.
Are they getting better looking?
I think
change
I think they're better looking. I think some of the old ones, used to have like the black cells with like the metal edging, and now they're just kind of like a solid sleek black or solid like dark blue.
They don't look like a ham radio anymore.
No, they don't
better.
look like a ham radio anymore. and
good.
they've gotten lower profile too, so the gap between the panels and the roof has gotten smaller.
Yeah.
So they kind of they don't stick up as much.
Just tell those people to buy a third-story house. Third-story house, and they don't.
Exactly.
Nobody's looking at it.
If your roof's tall enough, nobody's going to see it.
That I'm that guy.
Yeah.
It's like my next door neighbor has this perfect rectangle with like one thing. Otherwise, it's just a wall.
Yep.
And when we got an estimate, we have this tall. So there were like 3 here and 1 over here, and then 2 over here, and then this random. It was just I'm like, I can't do it.
Well,
Yeah.
And I think maybe we go to like, because we obviously people listen in, right, on the real estate side of things as far as like how this contributes to a real estate transaction. And so like from a real estate perspective, let's just fill in the blank here. You should get solar if, what would you guys say?
If you understand that there will be some buyers out there that are willing to assume the cost, or you're comfortable knowing that there's a group that won't be, and that you might have to be responsible for paying it off to get your home sold. It just depends.
Yeah. What else? You should get solar if.
You care about the environment.
I'm speaking out of turn, but I would say that's part of it. We did an episode months ago about, if you want to get new windows, great, get new windows, but don't do it because you're going to increase the value of your home. Don't do it with that in mind. If you want to do it, it's a great thing. I think, if you're going to be there for 10 years, great, do it. It sounds to me, where I was more of a skeptic, if you come in with a lease, aside from Kim's point, like not everyone's going to assume it, but you're in a pretty good shape that if you've locked in a better cost, it may not be a major point of friction to your sale. So that's kind of what I'm leaning. Because I was of the mind that I don't think I'll be there long enough, I'm not going to do it. Now maybe I'm punching myself, aside from the fact that it's going to look so bloody ugly on my...
So aside from aesthetics, right, so you've got length of time in the home. You've got the return on investment. So, and then also you've got the cushy feeling of going green, right? So you can go green and get a cheaper electric bill. Now, if you work from home and you got all the electronics and everything else powered up, I think there's a big incentive to do that because you're using more of that power during that, is it 11 to 7? That's that big key window?
1 to 7.
1 to 7?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the key rate there. So there's some timing aspects in what your lifestyle adapts to. So, but some things on the Jackson, you haven't weighed in on the pros here.
One more point and then I'll pass it. What we haven't talked about yet is if you have an electric car. Like my brother has an electric car. They bank a lot of hours and they have literally zero, energy costs, et cetera, for the car. That's anyway, a huge win.
Good point.
You have both. Buddy.
That's going to cause audio issues. I mean, pretty much what you guys said. I think the biggest consideration for me would just be the duration of being in the home. With that break-even point, I think if you're going to stay there for a long time, it could make sense. I also think there's just certain candidates where, like you said, if your roof has a bunch of different slopes and pitches, if a lot of it's facing north, if you have a neighbor's trees blocking your roof, I think you might want to, perhaps look at those things as well. You might have more expertise on that, but I'm sure there's better candidates just house-wise for solar than others.
Yeah, no, and that's absolutely true. Before we go to install any glass up on the roofs, we always do a pretty thorough site inspection. Our engineering and design team takes into consideration everything from the quality of your roof trusses, your main panel. Take a look at all that. And sometimes there are upgrades needed. I live in a house that's about 120 years old. My house needed a main panel upgrade. That was something that kind of got rolled into the cost, and it was actually much more affordable than doing it without solar panels. So, being able to take care of that, or being able to take care of, like, if there's tree trimming that needs to happen in order for, you got to clear some of nature's solar panels in order to get that sunlight on your roof. So there are definitely some houses that are just better for it than others. And sometimes it's just, sometimes it's just not feasible. A lot of times people who live in like townhouses, they own the townhouse, but the HOA owns the roof. And that's, we can't work with that because, the HOA gets to decide whether they want to allow solar panels on the roof or not.
And I think there's also a lot of misconceptions within real estate that having solar panels causes the transaction to go haywire, or, they're more likely to terminate or things like that. But in my experience, I've never had an issue with solar panels. So I think agents out there that are scared of them just need to get a little bit more educated on how to manage a transaction with a home that has solar panels, because it's honestly never been an issue for me.
Yeah.
But I will say, you do see people, the type of buyers, you do see people who are shopping at the higher end of their budget that just can't afford that additional cost. There are sellers that do have to pay it outright to get their home sold, but then there's other scenarios where it just transfers easily, and the new homeowners are excited about solar panels and they're willing to take on the whole loan, right? Yeah. So you really see all of it.
Yeah. And I will say, so, I've definitely heard of occasions where there have been friction in transferring a lease from one homeowner to the next. We do have, that is kind of a point of pride of ours. Like, we have an entire team dedicated to just supporting that transition. And the one document, it literally is just like a one-page document, one signature to transfer the lease, transfer the account. Because even if the panels are purchased outright, you still have to transfer the account. Because, like, we have like an app that it shows all the production of all the panels. It's very nice. It's very clean. And, being able to transfer the account information, even just from like the technology perspective. But we try to make it as smooth and as simple as possible. And I have all the empathy in the world. I get, like, selling and buying a home is an enormously complicated transaction. And you all do a really great job of simplifying that and helping your customers, your buyers, your sellers, helping them navigate what's for most of us a really daunting transaction. And so, thank you for that. Like, when my wife and I bought our home a few years ago, like, we just had enormous gratitude for our realtor, just like, could not thank her enough. And so, because it is a complicated transaction, like, you just don't want to do anything that's going to add any additional complexity to it, even if it's just a one-page document with one extra signature. So, I get that, but we do everything we can to make it simple, make it straightforward.
And you guys do a soft credit check for the new buyer, the new homeowner, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And have you ever seen a scenario where they're not approved for some, if they're able to buy a house, I'm assuming they can assume a lease or be approved for one. Have you ever seen someone be denied?
So I have never seen someone be denied. We will, we guarantee that everyone will be able to assume our lease. If their credit score is below a 650, then there's just an extra $250 fee associated with that. So, but if their credit score is above a 650, which pretty much everyone who's buying a new home, is above a 650, then there's no issues there with the credit.
That's awesome.
I was going to make one last point, stating the obvious to anyone watching this. We're in Colorado.
Yeah.
Who has a better grid for solar than Colorado? No one, right?
No, we get 300 days of sunshine a year, right? Might as well put that sunshine to use. Do something good with it.
Actually, to that point, really quick, can you just tell people about the warranty, what they shouldn't do if solar's on their home, just to avoid losing that warranty?
Yeah. So if you're leasing your panels, then your main responsibility is to just don't mess with them. Don't touch them. If you suspect there's some issue with them, just call us. We'll have somebody out as soon as we can.
So never
And-
have their own roofer come and look at them?
No. Don't have your own roofer. Don't have, your guy down the street with the truck come and
So if they need a roof replacement, calling their insurance agent first, calling you second before any work gets done or anyone starts messing with
Yeah, exactly. If you need a roof, typically you'll file a homeowner's insurance claim, and that claim will cover the cost of removing and installing the panels, removing them, doing the re-roof, and then reinstalling them.
Awesome.
Perfect, thank you.
And there's a bit of complication there. I mean, then the waiting time, right? Sometimes I've seen that happen. I've seen it be really bad with some other companies that should be in the car business only, but it varies one company compared to another. But I think that for me, you should get solar. You should really take a good look into it. If you're planning on being in your house for a long time and you just replaced your roof, that's prime time, right? Look into it, see if it makes sense. And I think the leases, I've never had an issue, to Kim's point, on a lease. Never. On the purchases, we have had a couple challenges in tough markets, high inventory markets, where buyers just look at the balance on the loan and say, I don't want to assume that. That's debt. That was not my decision. Seller got the tax credit. I don't want to deal with that. And we have had some buyers dig their heels on that a little bit on purchases. But on leases, it's just a pretty simple process. Like you said, you make it so easy. And so I think that part, it makes sense, because you're just taking away an electrical payment and saving money, right, per dollar. And the energy cost is a little bit better just by going with the lease and letting the solar do its thing on a lease. So I think that's a great idea, especially if you're in a situation like that.
Yeah.
So.
And I will say, Jackson, both you and Landon mentioned, if you're going to be in your house for a long time, I would say that's true for purchasing the panels. If you're going to purchase the panels, it makes sense if you're going to be in your home 10 years or longer. But if you're not, I still think, signing up for a lease, you're saving money today. The rate you're paying us for electricity on just a cents per kilowatt hour basis is lower than the rate that you would be paying Xcel on a cents per kilowatt hour basis.
I would agree, even knowing that it's easier to transfer in a transaction too.
Yeah.
So if you were to move in 3 to 5 years, knowing that that's an easier route to take, why not?
Yeah,
Give it a try.
exactly.
So I have a friend who's kind of a Rain Man type. If I told him about the environmental benefits, he really doesn't care, So, and I'm just thinking now, if I kind of presented this to him, I think the first thing he would say to me is okay, well, I'm investing $35,000 into solar, and I'm protecting myself against the increasing utility rates. What would you say to someone who says, why wouldn't I just invest that $35,000 into an investment or a CD or bonds, things like that, for let's say hypothetically a larger return?
Well, I mean, if you're strictly looking to just find some place to put your money to get the highest ROI, then that's something you're just going to have to look into. I think that is one reason why you would want to go solar, but that's not the only reason you would want to go solar, is just to generate the highest ROI on your dollar investment. I do think there is, anyone who claims they can get better than, a 10% ROI on whatever investment, there's an element of gambling in there, but some people really like that gamble. Some people really like the thrill of trying to find what's going to generate the highest dollar on my investment. So I can't really speak to that, whether somebody's going to be able to just say, oh, this is going to generate the highest dollar value for my investment. I don't know. I think there's a lot of reasons. I will say one thing that you mentioned, electric cars. So, if you're getting an EV, solar really makes sense. Does anyone here garden? Anyone garden?
Jackson,
Yeah?
What do you
grow?
23.
A lot of hot peppers, versolinums, a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Nice. I think there's something really satisfying about being able to pick tomatoes and peppers and basil and from your backyard and then take it into your kitchen, serve it up, maybe share a dish, share some salsa you made with your neighbors. There's a satisfaction that comes from that. There's a sense of self-reliance, independence, but also I can share with my community. A lot of people that go solar and then also get an EV, get an electric heat pump instead of that. Like there's a sense of like self-reliance and independence. Like I'm powering my life on my own terms, not on Excel's terms. They kind of get that same sense of satisfaction there. I don't know. That's something a lot of people who've gone solar have told me is like, it feels really good.
Altruism lives.
Yeah.
I was going to refute your approach is that what we've learned is the cost of energy is going up every month. So it's a negative returning asset. So even if you're just not losing money, you're better off. And over time, you're probably saving a lot.
Yeah.
You might even compete with putting it in the market.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what we call the cost of doing nothing. Like, it's hard to measure the cost of doing nothing. But, because none of us have a crystal ball, but there's definitely going to be a cost to doing nothing. So.
Definitely. A lot of approaches to take, a lot of things to think about and consider, as far as solar goes. We've had a 45-minute discussion here, and we could keep going on and on and on. But hopefully the listeners have gotten some good content and good information out of this. If it's something that you are considering as far as doing solar, recommend talking to Eric over at Sunrun, and we can put your information on the bottom of this so that you guys can contact him with his information below. And then if you're asking more questions about like how does this pertain to a real estate transaction and that sort of thing, we're happy to give you some insight there and as far as that goes. And so thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Eric, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. This is a pleasure. Y'all are great. Appreciate it.
So if you have enjoyed what you're listening to and you'd like to hear more, make sure to press that subscribe button so that you can not miss out on any more episodes that are coming up. And also check out all of our contact information is below. You can see us at the dreamsmithteam.com to look up more information about our team and our history and all of the members of our team and see contact information that you can reach us if you have any real estate needs.
See you next time.